Welcome back to the Big Lad Podcast. In this episode, I'm going to be answering all of your questions. First of all, thank you very much for everyone sending them in. There's some brilliant questions coming up. So let's get straight into it. First one, what is something that you're proud of? And I took a little bit of time to think about this one. Something that I'm proud of is genuinely just the life that I've built up for myself over the last few years. I've worked my corporate job for 12 years. I started at the bottom at an apprenticeship level, built myself up into a really decent position now. On top of that, I'm proud of the podcast that I've built, the conversations that I've had, the man that I've become along the way. I was never that confident speaking in front of people, never that confident in speaking in front of crowds. Something that I pushed myself to do over the last 12 years, especially at work. And then through the podcast, that's really helped things as well. Just elevate it to the next level. Another thing that I'm really proud of at the moment is my hiking group. I started that back in December, and now we've had over 90 attendees across each of the walks. And the amount of messages that I now get from people saying, I'm so glad that I came. I'm so glad that I put myself out there and stepped out of my comfort zone. And then seeing groups of new friends going out on hikes together. So this weekend and the weekend before, 3 people that came on my last walk have then since gone walking themselves outside of that. And that, I don't want to sound big-headed, but that would have never happened if I didn't start the group. So it's kind of like a butterfly effect, and I just love seeing it happen. So they are some of the things that I'm pretty proud of at the moment. Do you have any goals this year that you'd like to achieve? So this is something I actually do every single year. I get in my notes app and I just put the year at the top and then goals that I set myself throughout the year. So there will be work-related goals, sort of social media goals, financial goals, things like that. I'm not going to go into too many details of what I want to do, but I have already achieved some of them, which is really good. Some of them is going to be a work in progress across the rest of the year. One of the ones, if we're going to stay podcast related, is that I want to hit 50 episodes this year and at least half of them being guested. Actually, last night, I spent a lot of time going through notes that I'd set up for guests that I want to get on, sort of achievable ones, people that I know and people that I could reach out to, and then sort of goal tier guests that I'm going to work towards. And then not only that, I want to do more episodes in person. So I also categorize the people by people that live close by, people that live, say, in London, people that are abroad. So my aim is to now do a little bit of traveling if I can in between my job, to then basically go and do a load of in-person episodes in maybe one go, in like a batch, get like 4 episodes done in a weekend in London, something like that. That'd be pretty cool. So that is, one of my goals for the podcast this year, and obviously to then grow it as well. I have recently taken on some podcast coaching, already started seeing some changes and growth in some of the changes that I've implemented off the back of feedback that I've been given. One of them is the new setup downstairs. Instead of being at my desk with a darker background, this, I think you would agree, looks a lot better than my previous setup. And it was something that I was actually toying with for a little while, but just having a few conversations with people, it made me sort of go for it and give it a go. Have you ever gone through a period of being lost within yourself? Yes. And I'm not saying that it's necessarily a bad thing to question where you're at in your life, but I've had this feeling for a good few years, probably just in the background of what do I want to do? What do I want to achieve with my life? And spending the last 12 years in the corporate world, it has made me realize that no one's really got it figured out. Even the people at the top of my company, which is a massive multinational company, they don't really have it figured out. It's just they're a little bit further along in life. They've got a bit more experience, but they are also still coming up against new challenges, because something that really sticks with me is that, for instance, this is the first time I've been 30. So it's the first time I'm experienced this part of my life. And it's the same for, say, new parents. It's the first time they've been a parent. So they've got no sort of experience in doing it. They've just got to learn on the job, essentially. And that is the case for anything in life. You are where you are in life for the first time. So there's nothing really that can prepare you for that other than living through it and pushing through. Being lost in yourself means as well that you know there's something that you need to do in order to maybe fulfill yourself a little bit more, or just put yourself in a place where you're more comfortable. And I'm not I always say that comfort is like the enemy, but in terms of being within yourself, sometimes that can be a good thing for short periods of time. I have often thought, well, what do I want to do? I'm now 30 years old. I've been a management accountant for the last 12 years. Do I want to do that for the rest of my life? Is there other options out there? Could I sort of grow my podcast to then make that full time? That would be amazing. And for that to happen, I need to get it to grow. So if you're at this point in the podcast and you're not subscribed yet, drop me a little subscribe. It helps more than you think. But yeah, I've had this, for a good 5 to 10 years. Am I where I am? Am I where I want to be? Am I going in the right direction? It's a good thing to question. It's a good thing to ask yourself, because quite quickly, 30 turns to 35, turns to 40. And it's never too late to start something new. But the thing is taking action when you're in that uncomfortable phase to then move towards something that aligns with you better. That is the piece of advice I would give, which actually links very nicely into the next question, which is, what's the best piece of advice you've given and received? Main one is control the controllable and don't waste time and energy on the uncontrollable. Just control your reaction to it. That, for me, is what is holding so many people back from taking action, and what is also keeping people where they are, because they worry so much about things that they can't control that it actually stops them taking action in the first place. I mentioned in the last episode that I'd had a couple of conversations with people online about posting, because they messaged me saying, I wish I could put the videos out there like you do, but I can't do it. And they were limiting themselves by worrying about what other people were thinking of them, or they were worried about maybe it doesn't reach anyone. These things aren't really in your control. The things that you can control is putting yourself out there in the first place, because if I didn't do that, I wouldn't be in the position I am now. And I'm far from where I want to be. But by starting a hiking group, last hike I had 20 people. The hike before that, there was 26 of us climbed Snowdon. So, and I've met so many new people off the back of that. By starting a podcast, I've had conversations with people all over the world. Like on literally Monday, I've got an episode with a guy from America. Next Sunday, another guy from America. I would have never spoken to these people if I didn't put myself out there in the first place. Quite often people will limit themselves purely because of this negative feedback loop that they give themselves. Instead of focusing on what if it doesn't work out, why not think, what if it does? Because often the negative picture that we put in our heads is always worse than the reality of what actually happens. And that is, in a way, a fault of your brain's protection mechanism. In a way, it will protect you from, negative experiences, but it is always way worse in your head than it is in person, because the amount of people, say on the hiking group, that have come along, they have said, I was so worried about coming along, but now I've made so many new friends and so many things in common with people. Just by stepping outside your comfort zone, you will honestly change your life. If you forever stay in your comfort zone and don't take action, then you're going to stay where you are. And by the sounds of it, that's probably not working for you right now. So why not at least give yourself the opportunity for your life to get better? The best piece of advice I would say I've received is probably don't expect different results from the same actions. So if you are constantly doing the same thing, don't expect the result to change. And this is true for things like my podcast. There's been things that I thought were really good or they looked great, and then over time, the results showed that nothing was changing. So I had to change things. Then you see a little bit of growth and then it plateaus again. So you've got to change something else. And then finally, I've took the leap to get some podcast coaching, because the things that I'm doing aren't quite working. But with a little bit of sort of professional advice, I've now started seeing changes already, and I'm literally like a week in. So if you are constantly doing the same things, don't expect different results. That is one of the best pieces of advice I've probably received that I can think off the top of my head. Next one. What's something about you that sounds made up but is 100% true? So just to preface this, I've not really gone through and thought of answers for these. I thought it would be better if they were sort of right off the top of the dome. But considering it's called the Big Lad Podcast, for reference, I'm 6'4", I'm 17 stone. It's not always been this way. So back when I was in sort of school, high school, I was never the tallest, never the smallest, but probably average to maybe just below average height. And then it hit year 10 at school. So what was I, 15? I then grew 8 inches in 6 months over the summer. So I had one of my best mates is 5'8". He was 5'8" when we were 15, so he was a pretty big kid. He just never grew after that. At the end of year 10, he was taller than me. By the time we started year 11, I was way taller than him. And it was to the point where I went to school and the teachers genuinely thought they had a new pupil. Not going to lie, it was painful because my bones were growing quicker than my muscles could cope with. So I had really tight shins. I had really tight hamstrings as well. I'd always pull my hamstrings, especially as a kid, not that common. But yeah, I would have issues pulling hamstrings quite a lot and having really painful shins. Like I would literally be walking to school and my shins would be throbbing in pain, which never really helped because my mate was always late. So we were always in a rush to get to school, which, yeah, was not nice having to try and like jog on really tight shins. Have you ever walked away from a podcast completely rethinking a core belief you used to hold? I think there's nothing that's really massively changed a core belief. I think it's more that it's been eye-opening for me in terms of what other people go through. So quite early on in the podcast, I had a few girls that I knew on Instagram through the fitness community. And I didn't realize how common eating disorders were, especially in the fitness industry. And that really opened my eyes up. I didn't think it was as common as that. I knew of a few girls that I went to high school with that had issues, but overall, I didn't really think it was that common of a thing. But then when you get deeper and deeper into the fitness industry, you realize how much people are struggling with it. I think that would be one of the main things that I've noticed by sort of having the podcast and speaking to people. Obviously, there's a lot of solo episodes in there as well. So with me having the plan to have more guested episodes, I'm going to only open that up more. There's been some really interesting guests that I've had on in the past. One of the ones that stood out last year was Justin Crompier. He was addicted to heroin. He then got himself clean, and he taught me through the whole process of that, what he was going through, and then how he's came out the other end. And I'm not going to lie, he is a world-class photographer and videographer. He doesn't like me saying it because he's very humble, but his video quality and his photography are incredible. So I'd highly recommend you go and check his story out and go and check that episode out as well because it was brilliant. What part of your actual unmasked personality do you think your online audience would most be surprised by if they met you in real life? So over the years, I've been told that I come across very sort of serious and corporate, and that probably comes from me having a corporate job. So corporate George kind of shows up in the online space as well, and that's maybe a bit of a protection mechanism because I don't want to be like necessarily unprofessional to the point where like someone might complain to me at work. But it's probably that I really don't take things that seriously. I'm a massive wind up. I love having a laugh. I literally don't take anything seriously. And it goes to show on like the hikes, people thought that I was going to be like this really serious person. It was going to be like a serious walk. And then they turn up and they see me. And yeah, it is not completely different. I am still this person. I'm just a lot more probably free in real life than I am online. And that kind of was discussed in an episode with Jack Gibb. That was, I think, 2 episodes ago. So we spoke all about that because he's very sort of free speech, says what he thinks, whereas I've got to be a bit more careful and reserved purely because of my job. But yeah, I would say if you met me in person, you would probably think, not that I'm a complete idiot or anything like that, but that I'm a lot more free-spirited and, yeah, just up for a laugh. I will take the mick. I'll rinse you for pretty much anything, but it's a lot of give and take in the hiking space. I'm not just bullying people. I just like having a laugh and having that easygoing sort of environment that people just feel welcoming into. Because I think if I turned up and I was really serious, people would be like, I'm not going to come this again. He's not exactly very fun. So that would probably be the thing that would be most surprising for people. And then following on from that, so has there ever been a time where you wanted to just burn down the sensible online image to show up exactly who you are in private? Yes and no, because at the end of the day, I'm doing a podcast which is sort of overarching topic is personal growth and development, and a little bit of mental health in there, and then just generally really interesting stories, and kind of touch on a bit of philosophy with the stoicism side of things. But I have shown parts of that, probably more towards my TikToks. They seem to be a bit more silly and a bit more jokey, but I think I still want people to take me seriously, because obviously I've done online PT. I don't want to come across like this just idiot that messes about all the time, because that's not who I am. I still have this sort of pride in my appearance and how I come across to people. I still want people to take me seriously. I don't want to just become this sort of joker that has a podcast that then people may not take seriously too. So it's having that balance. What is a topic you are dying to cover but haven't yet? So there's not necessarily a burning topic that I've got. It's more the guests that I want to speak to. Like I said, I've got this massive list, including goal guests, which some are currently out of reach, but I'm putting the stepping stones in place to then get to those people. And yeah, it's not necessarily a topic I want to speak about. It's an interesting person that I want to speak to that's got an interesting story. I am very open to speaking about most topics, I would say, but I'm more interested in the actual individual behind the topic than I am the actual topic. It sounds simple to say control the controllable, but for a lot of people, the human response to uncertainty is to stress about the uncontrollable. What concrete steps or tools would you recommend to someone to help them bridge that gap and actually train their brain to let go of things outside their power? And how have you managed to master this yourself? Yes, control the controllable can be a lot easier said than done, which I completely understand. And it is having to just have that sort of mental control to step back from whatever situation it is and figuring out, how can I actually impact this? And what is in my control? What is out of my control? And yes, it can be difficult to not stress about the uncontrollable stuff. And like I say, the additional line to that is control your reaction to it. So control your reaction to the uncontrollable stuff. So if something happens to you, there's literally nothing that you can do about that. The only thing that you control is your reaction. Do you crumble? Do you stare it in the face and push through it? Do you understand what has happened, why it's happened? And yeah, I completely understand. It is a lot easier said than done. But it is having that sort of second or two to pause, to understand what's happened, and then to then take that first action to say, right, what can I do about this situation? How can I react to it? I think it's almost a difficult one for me to explain, because I'm not saying that it comes naturally. It's something that I've just been able to do through dealing with things in a very sort of, this goes in this box, put it over there and deal with it. I'm very good at compartmentalizing things, which again can be negative. It can be very positive. But yeah, it's taking that couple of seconds instead of just instantly reacting to something, breaking down, tears, whatever. I'm not saying don't cry about things. Obviously, there's things that are still very emotional, and you're more than welcome to express your emotions. But it's about having that couple of seconds just to actually focus on what's happened, why it's happened, and then how to take the next steps to get past whatever it is that you are going through. Terms like trauma and narcissist have completely lost their clinical meaning due to online overuse. What is your take on why the dilution of these therapy buzzwords actually matters? And what do you think it's doing to the way people talk about their problems and navigate their mental health? So yes, I would massively agree. Things like trauma, narcissist, toxic, even depression and ADHD, massively overused buzzwords these days. And especially with things like ADHD and depression, it actually takes away from the people that are struggling with it. I kind of joke myself that I've got undiagnosed ADHD, but that's about all I say about it, because I do actually show signs of having ADHD. I've just never bothered to get tested to put a label on it, because I personally don't think there'll be any benefit from me finding out whether I have it or not. But I've been told by multiple different people that I show a lot of signs, but exactly, it's undiagnosed. It's not something that I use in my content or anything like that. It's just something that I sort of say in sort of friends and family settings. But it can almost be like a boy who cried wolf. So I think there's a very low barrier to things like trauma, toxic, narcissist, depression even. And like I say, it does take away from the people who are genuinely struggling from these situations. And I imagine the people that are struggling don't necessarily felt seen or heard as much as they probably should, because there's maybe an influencer saying, oh, I was so depressed, when everyone experiences depression in their own way. There's levels to it, and the same with ADHD and the same with trauma, narcissist. It's different for everyone. But I think the genuine baseline to all of those things is so low. I think a lot of people that say they're depressed probably actually aren't depressed. They just need to get up off their ass and go and touch some grass and go to the gym and eat right and sleep well. They don't need to go to an NHS doctor who within 5 or 10 minutes is going to give them an antidepressant. That is not the solution. That is a failure of the system. You cannot diagnose someone with depression within that short space of time. There's probably days where I've been down. I could probably go to an NHS doctor, say what's gone on in my day, and they'll be like, right, there's some antidepressants, crack on. And I don't think that's the right solution, because there are days where I feel a bit crap, I feel a bit down. But guess what? I get up, I go to the gym, I go do the things that make me feel good. And guess what? I feel so much better after doing them. And the studies that actually show that working out are as effective or more effective than SSRIs. So before you go jumping straight into an antidepressant, actually look at what your life is currently, see what you can change to make that better. Things like working out release those feel-good hormones, release those endorphins. By eating better, you're naturally just going to feel better. By sleeping better, you're going to feel more energized. So it's not about just magic pill, because it's not a magic pill. It'll just numb you from the ups and downs of life, because then when you come off them, I've had this conversation with quite a few people that have come off them, they really struggle then with the highs and lows of life. And that is what life is. Life's not this constant sort of 50% level. Sometimes it goes down to 10, sometimes it goes up to 100. And that's just the way life is. I always joke about the Ronan Keating song, Life is a Roller Coaster. Sometimes you've just got to ride it. And as cringy and as like silly as that is, it's absolutely true. I've actually got it in a frame on my work desk, like the actual lyrics in the shape of a vinyl, because it is something to just remember. Life does go up and down. And again, it's controlling the controllable and not spending time and energy worrying about the uncontrollable, because life is a roller coaster. It will go up and down. You've just got to deal with it. You've got to control your reaction to each of them. So yes, I think the words are just getting used far too much just for clicks and viral content, especially when it comes to relationships. I really do not like the trend at the moment where people are online speaking about past relationships as traumatic, narcissistic, toxic, because at the end of the day, there's going to be someone that knows who that person is that they're speaking about, and that's going to put a very negative image on them, and you're only getting one side of the story. Just because they've said they were a toxic boyfriend or a toxic girlfriend does not mean they were actually toxic. So I'm really not a fan of that content. So yeah, something's got to happen. I don't know how you're going to be able to manage it, but just if you're going to make this sort of content, be conscious of the impact that it may have on someone who's genuinely struggling with one of those terms. So this is from a conversation I actually had online with one of the girls that came hiking. She's actually a therapist, and she actually provided a lot of these in-depth questions. So thank you very much. You know who you are. I won't shout you out because I know you won't like it. You recently claimed to have a trauma-free life. Do you think it makes you a more objective observer of human behavior, or does it risk making you an outsider to the people you are trying to connect with, either on the pod or outside of it? So I say I've not had a traumatic life because I genuinely don't think I am, but that could also be just because I'm really good at dealing with things. I don't necessarily struggle with a lot. So some of the things that I may have been through could be traumatic to someone else. It may just be I've got that good of an understanding of how I deal with things. And this isn't me being big-headed or anything like that. It comes with, experience, practice and things like that. And just I think I'm a very level-minded person, and I live the controllable and don't stress about the uncontrollable very well. And that, I don't know whether that's come naturally or whether that's developed over time. But like I say, some of the things I've been through may be traumatic to someone else. For instance, we found out my auntie had terminal cancer. 4 weeks later, she was gone. That could be very traumatic for someone else. At the time, it was horrible. It was very upsetting, but there was nothing that we could do about it. They were the cards that we'd been dealt. And yeah, it was a tough time for the family. Probably still is in some instances, but there's nothing that we could have done because it was terminal. There's something that we had to deal with. So there's other things that probably I've been through that people may think are very traumatic. I just think I've got a very, like I say, level-minded mindset of dealing with things. I don't necessarily stress too much about things. I live a very, not a laid back life, but a very controlled sort of mindset, I would say. And yeah, I guess it could make me a bit of an outsider to people that have struggled with things. I said it actually on our last hike. There was a lot of people talking about things that had happened to them that they'd struggled with. And I was sort of sat there thinking, I actually said to them, I said, you guys make me feel normal in a way. But then I said, considering I'm one of the only ones that hasn't been through these sort of things that you guys seem to have been through, maybe that makes me not the normal one and you guys the normal one, because I was, like you say, the outsider in that. So I think having the podcast has definitely opened my mind up a lot more to what other people go through and how they struggle with things. I think I've just got very good systems with dealing with events and negativity and, well, even positivity in a way. And there's a follow-up to this question, which is, psychological resilience is often built through friction. If you truly haven't experienced trauma, where does your depth and drive come from? So I actually kind of disagree with this one, where I don't think you need to experience a traumatic event to gain depth and drive. I think you could still go through things, hard things, and it's not traumatic. There's also the fact that if I want to get somewhere, then I have to be disciplined to be able to get there. There's things that I have to do that I don't want to do. Like, I hate editing when it comes to podcasts. I hate it. And as soon as I get enough money, say if I can monetize the podcast, that will be the first thing that goes out. Someone else can edit it and do all the scheduling of content. I just want to sit and speak in front of a camera. But I don't think it has to be trauma to be friction. I think you can build like psychological resilience just by doing difficult things for long enough. That it doesn't have to be a life-defining, changing moment that is this, I don't know, horrific event. I think you can be driven by where you want to get to. I was always brought up on the term that you will be average. Anyone, like, you can be average. Congratulations, you are average. You can go and work a standard 9-to-5 job. You can afford an all right house or apartment, flat, whatever. You can have an all right car. Well done, you are average. If you want to take that to the next level, and you've got to put the work in. And that's it. I'm a driven person. I think it also comes from my background in sport. So I've always played football all my life, but back in high school and college, I was rowing, and I had GB trials twice. I raced at national events. I raced at Henley. I raced at the Queen's Coronation down in London, in Warwick. There's so many sort of events, I think, that really prepped me for adult life at a young age. So I was sort of between the ages of 15 and 18 that I was really doing the rowing. And being in those sort of high pressure environments probably really helped me when it came to the workspace, because I'd put events on for 150 people with our CEO, who is now on the news quite regularly and like high up in like government talks. And I was doing that at the age of, I don't know, 18, 19, speaking in front of 150 people. No problem, really. And having the pressure on me that I've organized this event for people to turn up to. But the people that I used to row with, so they would really get nervous when it came to going to a race. So quite often with the rowing, you'd start at one place, you'd row up to the start line, but quite often you would be in a massive queue. So you could be sat there for 30 to 60 minutes and they'd be so nervous. And at this point, I realized I need to relax these people. I need to make jokes. I even made fun of other people's boats just to throw them off a little bit. But I would just literally sit there and have a laugh with them. And then everyone would get more relaxed, because in my head, the more stressed you are about a situation, the more likely you are to make mistakes. And in our first couple of races, there were a lot of mistakes. It's called in rowing catching a crab, which is basically where your oar goes too far into the water, it gets dragged under, and you can quite quickly capsize a boat. We had a lot of those sorts of things in our first couple of races when we first started out. I noticed once I started relaxing people a bit more, those mistakes started going, because there was a lot less wasted energy mentally. We'd get to the start line and then it was go time. So I think that has come into my adult life very well, a lot of those experiences. But like I say, I don't think you have to go through a traumatic event to have depth and drive. It may help some people. Like you always see it in the football, where there's a world-class footballer that came from, I don't know, like the favelas of Brazil. And, that's the drive to get out of that. I'm fortunate to have come from quite a nice background. But yeah, I don't think it necessarily has to be traumatic. Knowing what you know about yourself, how do you think you cope with a severe life crisis if you never had to discover the true baseline of your emotional strength via any traumatic events? I genuinely think I would be okay. Yeah, I think I've built myself a solid baseline of mental strength and emotional strength that I could cope with most things that come my way. And that is not from like a big-headed thing. It's from a confidence point of view. It's not me being arrogant to say like I can like deal with anything. I'm genuinely confident in the fact that I may struggle a little bit, like anyone does. I might be a bit emotional. I might get upset about whatever it is. But in terms of my whole life sort of crumbling, I think I'd be genuinely fine. Seeing as you've hit the grand old age of 30, what advice do you have for someone hitting 30 who feels completely stuck with no clear direction or sense of purpose? How does a person in that position start filtering through the noise to discover what they are actually passionate about doing with their life? And how do you suggest they separate societal expectations from their actual desires? So again, coming from the corporate world, I think this is a very helpful one. Like I said before, no one has it figured out. Everyone is winging it. Like I've seen it firsthand. And just because someone's in a higher position than you at work doesn't mean they have it any more figured out than you do. They still go home to maybe issues with the partner. They've got kids pulling at the trouser leg to play with them when they get home. They've still got everyday problems like you and me. Even celebrities of the world, the people that most people look up to probably have bigger issues than you do. Yes, they may be very wealthy. Some of them are also very bad with managing money, but they probably have bigger issues going on than you think. And the thing is, that is muted by the fact that social media only shows you the best side of things. So when you're looking at your role models and things like that, whether it's someone in the workplace, whether it's a celebrity, sports person, I don't think you'd actually want to trade a day in their shoes if you actually knew what was going on behind closed doors. In terms of being stuck with no clear direction, one thing that always helps me is literally just mapping everything out. So I've got a whiteboard. You can get them off Amazon for about 15 quid, 20 quid, massive like sort of whiteboard. Put your name in the middle and just branch off. literally just start writing. So what I'm currently doing for work, what I'd like to do for work, what are my hobbies, what do I enjoy doing, what could I potentially monetize from my hobbies, just things like that. Like there's no better thing to do than actually writing it down on paper, because it makes it so much more clear than it being up in your head. I would dump as much stuff you can do on paper, whiteboards, you name it. I would suggest potentially not doing it on a laptop, because there's just something about actually writing it that makes it more concrete than typing it into your phone or your laptop or your iPad. But speaking to people as well. Speak to, I don't know, people that are living a life that you may want to live. See what they do, how they do it, what impact it has on them, whether they're genuinely fulfilled and happy about it. I think there's no sort of, this is the way to do it. I think you've got to find your own way. But that doesn't mean you can't go out and get advice from people. Another thing I would suggest is to not speak to people that you wouldn't take advice off in terms of direction. So if they're sort of openly giving you direction and sort of feedback and things like that, listen to it, but don't necessarily take action on it if you wouldn't genuinely take the advice off them. But in terms of societal expectations, ignore them. Everyone's on their own path. There's no concrete way to do life. There's no one route. And things can change. Like, you're never too old to make a change. Like, I'm 30 now. I could quite easily, if I wanted to, change into something else. And there's nothing really stopping you. Yes, there may be costs, but there's costs to everything. There's cost of inaction. There's cost to you sitting exactly where you are and not taking the leap, because there's always that what if, and life is too short to live not doing the things that you want to do, especially if it's because you're worried about what other people think. A lot of modern advice tells men to disconnect from their emotions to build discipline. At what point does that stoicism cross the line into actual psychological damage? So this, I think, is where stoicism is genuinely not understood properly. So everyone seems to think stoicism is being this cold-hearted person, not being in touch with your emotions, and it is the exact opposite. It is the epitome of controlling the controllable and not wasting time and energy on the uncontrollable. Just control your reaction to it. Stoicism is all about knowing and being comfortable with your emotions and controlling your reaction. You can still be stoic and still understand exactly what you're going through. You can still be emotional. It's just about understanding how to deal with them. So I think if someone's got actual psychological damage from stoicism, I don't think they've understood stoicism properly or read into it as much. It's not about disconnecting from their emotions to build discipline. It is understanding their emotions and being in touch with their emotions to build discipline. What is the hardest part about being a man that nobody actually talks about because it doesn't fit the strong or capable narrative? I think, obviously, there's a massive issue with men around mental health. And I had George from the Tin Men on about this topic. And the thing is that the sort of narrative that's played out is that men just need to talk more. And I can't remember the exact sort of stat that George gave me, but it was about the amount of men that had actually, reached out, spoke to a helpline, spoke up, and still ended their life. The issue isn't men sort of speaking up more. It's about taking action to make their life better so that they don't end up taking their own lives. Yes, speaking up can be the first point. Exactly. You need to understand what you're going through. You may need to speak that over with someone else, but that it doesn't just stop there. It's about then, right, well, what can I do to get me out of this situation? And I think a lot of people just think, oh, men just need to speak up more and they'll be fine. I think one of the things that he also said was that men aren't necessarily ending their lives because they're not speaking up more. It's because they're genuinely just dissatisfied with their life. So it's about, first point of call is to reach out to someone, whether it's a helpline, whether it's a family member, friends, your support network around you. But then it's not just there. It doesn't just finish there. It's about then taking the next steps to, how can I get out of this position where I am? well, you've got to then take ownership of your life to then put yourself in a better position where you're not in a bad place. And I think that is something that is very confused when it comes to men and their mental health. I think one of the other stats from George was that one of the main things that comes up is that men need a sense of purpose. If they don't have a sense of purpose, then that can send them into a spiral of sort of negativity and bad mental health. Yes, we need to speak up more, but then we need to take action to find the purpose that we sort of desire. A less serious one, but what is your emotional experience of being subject to such abuse from the hiking community you have built? So, I wouldn't say I'm getting such abuse, but basically, because I am a big wind-up, and everyone else can then see that I'm a bit of a wind-up, I don't take things seriously, I'm very hard to offend, people kind of take advantage of that and basically just pepper me with abuse. I don't find it abusive because I just find it as a laugh. But because I can deal with, having a laugh, it can be literally 20 versus 1, by the way, at times. And because I can give it back out, I don't really mind it, because I'd rather it be me as someone that can deal with it than someone else in the group getting stick that they can't necessarily deal with, and then they don't turn up the next time, especially if it's someone that's really stepped out of the comfort zone to come along to the walk in the first place. So I like to have it as like a really sort of relaxed environment, a jokey environment, to the point where people can feel comfortable to have a laugh and a joke, especially if it's with me, in terms of, just taking the mick out of me. I literally don't care. I don't take things too seriously, but just be prepared. If you're going to give me stick, expect to get it back. But yeah, we have a really good laugh. I really enjoy it. And I joke about them giving me abuse and things like that, which is probably why the question's been asked. But yeah, I would rather it be me than someone else in the group. How did you get such a massive dump truck? So this is something also that came up from one of the hikes, especially considering there was a photo taken on 0.5 zoom, and I was right in the corner of it, and it just amplified the size of my dump truck even more. But long story short, a couple of years ago, I did a good 5 or 6 months of knee rehab where I was doing leg day 3 times a week for solid 5 to 6 months. I actually carried it on probably more than that, more like 12 to 18 months, at least 2 times a week, because they wouldn't operate on me because I had no stability issues and I had a lot of muscle mass that could cope with having no ACL. And this has happened 3 times, basically. I've gone for MRIs and they've said, you've got no stability issues, you've got a lot of muscle that can cope with it, we're going to put you through rehab again. So not ideal, but yeah, basically I put an inch on both of my quads and 2 inches on my glutes. I think may have gone even bigger since, which is not very helpful considering I don't have a massive waist when it comes to buying trousers and shorts. But yeah, essentially that's it from doing a lot of knee rehab. What inspired me to start the podcast? So back in lockdown times, I had a lot of contacts in the fitness industry that I was going to go and do bits of YouTube with, go and do workouts, see how other people work out, just general vlogs. Obviously, lockdowns came along. That completely stopped that from happening. So it got to the 2021 lockdown. I think that was like lockdown 2 or 3. I thought, how can I still speak to this sort of group that I'd made? And I thought, why not start a podcast? So I literally started it on my work's laptop with my work's headset. I looked like I was working at a McDonald's drive-thru. And yeah, it's just gone from there. It started off in small series, which we're doing pretty well. And then I got really busy with work for a while. The podcast got put on the back burner. About 18 months ago now, I thought, right, I'm giving this a really good go. Did an episode a week. Well, I've still done pretty much an episode a week, and the podcast has seen more growth in the last sort of year than it had the previous 4 years combined. So yeah, we're taking it up levels. Production's getting better. Guests are going to get better. It's all going to get better. So stick around. And yeah, let's see where we can get it to. Last question. Why do you gym? So I gym because less of the reason why I originally joined, and more just mental sort of clearance after a long day at work, getting those feel-good hormones, the endorphins rushing, and just general fitness, health and fitness these days. But the reason I actually started the gym was after my massive growth spurt that I mentioned earlier. So I'd gone from, I think it was about 5'6" to 6'2", but I'd not really put that much weight on. So at 15, I was sat at 6'2" and 10 stone 2 pounds. I literally remember I went on holiday to Spain with my family, had a couple of photos around the pool, and I was like, damn, I need to join a gym. I am skinny, lanky, just streak of nothingness. Basically, I look like Skeletor. The only thing I had at home was like some 3 kilo dumbbells and a pull-up bar, and then I'd do press-ups and sit-ups, which can only get you so far. And then I basically begged my mum and dad to go to the gym, fell in love with it instantly, and quite quickly put a lot of weight on. Not a lot of weight, but like a good stone or two. Started rowing then shortly after, and yeah, that just took things to another level again, to the point where now I'm 6'4", 17 stone. So I've essentially put 70% of my body weight on since I joined the gym, which was 15 years ago. But yeah, that was originally purely because I just wanted to not look skinny, because I was getting comments at school saying, you're so tall and skinny now, and like that's not what I wanted. And now my brother says that I'm built like an adult toddler, because I've got very sort of fat forearms and tubular essentially. So yeah, I'm now a 6'4", 30-year-old toddler build, which is a great thing to be called, but at least I'm not tall and skinny. But yeah, I go to the gym now more for mental clearance. Like I said, after a long day of work, there's nothing better than just taking a bit of stress out on the weights and getting a good session in, feeling good, feeling healthy, and yeah, that is pretty much it. And that wraps this episode up here. So thank you very much if you asked any of these questions. I hope you enjoyed them. I hope you like my answers. If you want to get in the comments and have a little chat about some of them, I'm more than happy to do so. Drop me a DM on Instagram as well. If you're new, subscribe. If you enjoyed this one, drop a like, and I will see you in the next one.